Hey guys, welcome to Confusing Bits. I'm Corey, and today we're going to talk about The Eye of the World by Robert Jordan. This is the first book of the Wheel of Time series. As you can see, it's quite the mighty tome. And this is a very famous epic series. There's like over a dozen books or close to a dozen books. There's a ton of books, and they're all these meaty tomes. They first come out in like 1990, and the last three books I think were finished by Brandon Sanderson. I guess of Mistborn fame and the Casimir and stuff. I haven't read Sanderson yet, but he famously that like kind of kicked off his career. Oh, this is going to bother me if I don't fix it. There we go. So he famously finished up the series for Robert Jordan. This is an anniversary edition, so it's not the original. It's got like it's kind of like full printing on the side. I heard some criticism of this, but it's got a map on the inside. There's another map on the inside. From what I understand, it's not very special. It's just got a silver cover. The original cover looked more like this kind of old school kind of fantasy. We call it old school. It's like 1990. Had kind of old school fantasy, Pulp Fiction kind of looking cover. You know, it's your traditional cover. And then this is the anniversary, 30th anniversary edition. There's criticism that it's not a very nice anniversary edition. It's not really due. Apparently, even these maps were in the original, so it's really just a new cover, from what I understand. It's also got a little ribbon in there, so if you want to keep your place, that is if you're reading a big old huge book like this. I read this on Audible, like I do most of my especially fiction reading. The only thing that I really read nowadays, like read, is technical stuff where you got to actually see diagrams and stuff. But anyway, you guys don't care. Too long. I should do the too long didn't watch. This is a hefty tome, and you're gonna hear. I would say before you jump into this series, make sure you read up on several people who have read. Watch some videos or reviews or whatever about the book series from several people who have read the whole thing, because there are some caveats that go with this book. I will say, for me personally, this first book was a bit of a slog. I don't want to say it's bad, but I'm not immediate. Me personally, I'm not going to immediately. I already have the next book, but this is going to be a lower priority book. Like if I get everything else read that I had bought recently, and we get to the end of that, and I'll make a decision then if I want to continue on. But I've already had the book ready to go if I want to continue. But it is a very meaty tome. Before I get into the details, let's read some blurbs and stuff, right? Because that's the thing to do. Jordan has come to dominate the world that Tolkien began to reveal. The New York Times. I don't know what they're talking about there. It's on the front cover. The New York Times talking about this is not the same world. This is not Middle Earth. I don't know what they're talking about. Tolkien revealed Middle Earth. Tolkien is my Lord of the Rings books and the Hobbits. That's Middle Earth. This is not Middle Earth. This is its own. I don't even know the name of the world that they're supposed to be in. There's so much going on into this book that it's hard to keep everything straight. So let's see here. The internationally best-selling epic fantasy saga begins. Since its debut in 1990, The Wheel of Time has captivated millions of readers around the globe with its scope, originality, and compelling characters. The Wheel of Time turns, and ages come and pass. What was, what will be, what is, may yet fall under the shadow. Let the dragon ride again on the winds of time. Yeah. They have an Amazon series. I purposely haven't watched it because I'm not doing too well with the fantasy adaptations right now, so I don't have high hopes, and I don't want to spoil what little enjoyment I could get from the books by watching the series, watching a ho-hum adaptation. Like, we had the good adaptations with the Lord of the Rings, and then the early parts of Game of Thrones, where everything was high and everything was going well because, you know, authors were, well, the directors were like respecting the source material and doing a good job of faithfully trying to. There's always going to be some differences, but trying to faithfully adapt what was awesome about the book series into television series or movie series. They were very respectful, and then at some point it just became a money machine, and they started writing dribble. So like the last season or two of Game of Thrones is awful. I've heard terrible things about the Lord of the Rings television series on Amazon Prime. So I don't have high hopes for the television adaptation. I don't think we've got to wait for the pendulum to swing back around to something decent, right? We have somebody, you know, with an independent vision come in and finally give us, you know, some fantasy worth watching on television again. But we're not. I don't know that we're there yet. So I haven't heard anybody raving about Wheel of Time on Amazon. So I'm assuming it's probably not that good. So. I did buy I've been on this like jaunt of starting out several different series, very famous series. I did the Discworld, I did Expanse. What else did I do? I did Dresden Files. Of course, I did the Game of Thrones. Yeah, I did Discworld. I did some Forgotten Realms stuff with the Drizzt series. I kind of been dipping back in more into more things that because I didn't know what series I wanted. I have dug deep into the Star Wars lore, right? But I did all this one like I was a kid, right? Well, up till like my early 20s, and I haven't really followed it since. But so I've been into like deep into a series before. I'm kind of like looking for what's going to be my next one. But this one's probably going to be on hold for a while. I know this is controversial. But people really, and I'm taking it to heart. I really do understand it, and I believe them when I say that it's an awesome. People say this is an awesome series. I think maybe it was an awesome series if you read it as it was coming out, and so like you were reading it as every book came out. So like if you were following the Game of Thrones, as you know, you're waiting on the next book to be released. Maybe it was a bit more enjoyable back then, but especially now, reading it now, it feels incredibly, for me, it feels very derivative. I felt like I was reading a reskin, almost beat for beat, of Fellowship of the Ring. That's what it felt like. And it's a huge book. There are so many characters. It comes out the gate. This is part of the reason why I say it's so much like the Lord of the Rings, is that it right out the gate you get like a whole troop of characters. There's like I think like half half a dozen, more than half a dozen characters, like main characters, and then you've got all these other ancillary characters that are kind of in and out. So there's probably close to a dozen different characters that are just in this one book right off the get-go. And I don't know, I felt like all the characters felt more like caricatures of characters than really fleshed out people. And probably the most damning thing for me, maybe this is intentional, and maybe it's supposed to be a love letter to Lord of the Rings or whatever, but and maybe I'm just getting jaded over the years, but the chosen one trope is strong with this one, and it's immediately obvious. It's played kind of like it's supposed to be a mystery, but it's immediately obvious who it is, and there's no real tension. It's just like, okay, out with it already, you know, let's get this over with, let's pull off that bandage and let's get to something, an interesting part of the story. But no, it's teased through the whole book, and I don't know, it felt like all of the tension kind of felt orchestrated or contrived. There's of course the inciting incident, and then this troop of characters come together, and they're being chased, and they go to a place, a forgettable place, and then they're called up to, and then they go to another place, another forgettable place, and then of course they're called up to, and then, you know, shenanigans happen, people go off to the four winds. This is the dark moment of the story, and then it attempts to try and like develop the characters individually a little bit more, but it messes it up because it introduces more characters at this point of the branching story, where we need to be focusing on the characters you need to introduce, and then of course it brings everybody back together, and then there's the big finale. And it felt like I knew exactly where we were going at every single point. Now, I don't think I'm like especially insightful or anything as far as fantasy tropes go. It's just I felt like I had already read this book, and in particular this book, the book that I think I had already read was somewhat boring. I'm hoping maybe it improves. Like I said, I got the next book just in case I feel like continuing. It's ready to go, or at least it's there for a reminder, right? It's there to remind me that, you know, maybe I should be continuing with this story. But from what I've read, after I read this book, I started reading a little bit more reviews to try and get a better sense of how I feel about the situation, and I've seen somewhat similar sentiments, and then of course the apologists apologizing for things often don't dissuade me from my notions about what the way I have reacted from the book. In many ways it just reinforced things and talked about more things that would be off-putting. Like apparently in this series there's this whole like 3 or 4 book span where they call it the slog or something or other, and I'm like, and it's like a quarter, if you count all the books, it's like a quarter of the whole series, and they're just writing this off like it's that's okay that a quarter of the series is, by even the biggest fans, a slog. That's not, you know, I'm a big fan of Harry Potter. It was no moment that I read in any of those books that I did not enjoy myself as I was reading, and it is enjoyable through the whole thing. I will highly recommend the Harry Potter series for anybody who hasn't read it. Go out and read it. Yes, it's worth the hype. You know, can I say the same thing just off the first book? And no. It's done a poor job of really selling me onto this series. So this one's going on the back burner for me. The Wheel of Time series is going on the back burner for me. I have plans to revisit maybe at some other point when the sting of it has worn off some more. It's already been, I don't know, 2 or 3 months since I read the book, and I'm just getting around to finishing all the reviews. We're doing like a dozen reviews today, so so I've got several months backlog of reviews to go. So I'm just now getting. I read this like a month or 2 or maybe even 3 ago, and I'm still not feeling up to starting the next one. Maybe if I read it in the same order or the same timeline that people had when they were first reading it, like a book came out like every other year or something, maybe that's the pace I'll be able to read The Wheel of Time. I don't know. Where it'll make sense that this told me is because apparently what he does, especially because this was like pre-internet age or widespread internet age, he does a lot of recapping and stuff in his books, so it's kind of repetitive in that way, and that's part. You can think that was part of what you had to do is you had to. It was, you didn't have previously on Wheel of Time. There was none of that, and you couldn't just, go to the wiki and say, okay, what's the summary from the previous book, just to get yourself caught up. They were so long between books that there was more recapping that needed to be done. So that was part of the issue. Maybe I'm making excuses like as we go. So all the haters are going to hate me now for not absolutely loving this book. But yeah, I will be tabling this one for now, and I will revisit at a later date. But yes, yeah, it's a $40 book. What? Yeah, it's a hard sell. It's a big old tome. I mean, if you love it, you're getting your money's worth, right? How many pages is this? This is almost 800-page tome. It's quite the read. It took me, I think, pretty close. I do an audiobook and I read it like 2 times speed or something, and it took like a month to get through this. This is ridiculous. And I walk a month of at least like an hour a day. And so at least it felt like a month. It was several weeks at the very. It was at least a couple of weeks, maybe several weeks, getting through the book. So it's quite, especially when I'm doing my run or whatever, and I find myself thinking about it. I'm not even paying attention to the story. It's just babbling in my ear, So that's going to be interesting coming back to this, because I found it so boring that if I go to the second book, am I going to remember the things I need to know? Maybe I'll need the recap because the book was initially so boring. But yeah, I'm just crapping all over this book. But yeah, this is not my jam. Let's put it that way. And I'll leave it at that. So yeah, that's going on the table somewhere. I gotta organize my books. What is coming up next? I guess we'll do. I'm not gonna do the Haskell thing. That's gonna be a separate thing. I guess we'll do next up. Yeah. Next up, we'll do Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. It's a nonfiction book. Probably, so you'll see this in the next week. And until then, thanks for hanging out with me, and I'll see you guys in a week.